Welcome back to part 4 of Walls of Flame by Gerard Schultz. As I've said in each of these, I believe this work to be within the public domain. If you have information otherwise and that you feel this should be taken down from YouTube for any reason, please write me, let me know, and I will accommodate you if you have rights to the work. But continuing from where we left off, relief. It is estimated that 282 persons lost their lives in the fire. Almost 15,000 were homeless and more than 3,400 buildings were destroyed. Refugees poured into the villages, hungry, and many were absolutely naked. John Herrick, who was traveling between Baddox and Sand Beach with his rig, spent the night in a field. The next morning he overtook 2 women, each with a child, with not a single stitch of clothing on them. He had 2 grain sacks, which he tore up and gave to them. The refugees found shelter in homes, churches, schoolhouses, town halls, and sheds. Some lived in rail pens and some in holes in the ground. For several days, over 100 people found refuge in R.W. Sherman's house at Richmondville. It was the only building, with the exception of a rookery, not destroyed by the fire. The first supplies for the relief of the sufferers came from the nearby villages of Caseville, Port Austin, and Seaboing. Some of the sufferers did not even had not even eaten anything for 4 days. One family lived on parched corn for several days. The Port Huron relief train reached Sand Beach on Thursday night, September 8th. Arriving with the trains were the United States Senator Omar D. Conger, W. L. Bancroft, General William Hartsuff, Al Dixon, Peter B. Sanborn, and others. The same day, a train brought supplies to people north of Marlette who were almost starving. The steamer M.D. Ward delivered several $1,000s worth of goods at Sand Beach on Friday evening, September 9th. Elpino raised $1,000 in a few minutes, and on Saturday was hauling wagon load after wagon load of supplies to the docks for shipment to the sufferers. Thousands of people had lost everything except their land and faced the winter without food, clothing, shelter, bedding, or medicines. The farmers needed hay, grain for seed, lumber, and nails for building houses and barns, plows, harnesses, wagons, and agricultural implements, and tools of all kinds for farming. At first, relief was undertaken by separate committees in Port Huron, Detroit, Flint, East Saginaw, Bay City, and other places. E.C. Carleton, mayor of Port Huron and chairman of the Port Huron Committee for Relief, realized that much more help was needed than these communities could provide. Carleton therefore issued an appeal to the people of the United States, which stated that a most appalling disaster has fallen on the counties of Huron and Sanilac, Michigan, with some adjacent territory, a section of the county recently covered with forest and occupied by nearly 50,000 people, largely recent settlers, and either poor or in the very moderate circumstances. The appeal pointed out that thousands of people are destitute and helpless. All of these people require immediate assistance, and most of them must depend upon charity for months to come. We are doing all in our power to succor them, but the necessities of the case are so great that the contributions of the charitable throughout the country will be required to help them through the winter. We therefore appeal to you to send money, clothing, bedding, provisions, or any other supplies that will help maintain the sufferers and enable them to provide shelter for themselves and begin work again on their farms. Contributions were sent to E.C. Carleton, Chairman, or to M.H. Allard, Secretary, or to H.G. Barnum, Treasurer of the Port Huron Relief Committee. The appeal received widespread attention in newspapers. It appeared on the front page of the New York Tribune on September 9, 1881, Harper's Weekly, and Frank Leslie's Illustrated newspaper brought it to the attention of their readers. By October, the Port Huron Relief Committee had received $230,000 in cash, merchandise, and supplies, and at the same time, the Detroit Relief Committee had received $214,000 including cash and goods. Rivalry developed between the Port Huron and Detroit relief committees. It was reported that the New York Relief Committee was advised not to send any more money until the governor of Michigan has taken cognizance of existing difficulties and has appointed a state central committee to have entire charge of the contributions. Governor David H. Jerome issued a call for the various relief committees in the state to send delegates to a meeting to be held in Detroit on October 5, 1881. This meeting was attended by Governor Jerome of Lansing, James McMillan, Martin Butzel, George McMillan, and R.W. King of Detroit, Mayor John H. Wilkins of Bay City, Mayor John Welch, F.A. Ashley, and Charles F. Shaw of East Saginaw, Ezra Rust and S.B. Williams of Saginaw, General William Hartsuff, W.L. Bancroft, and Henry Howard of Port Huron. Governor Jerome was elected chairman of the meeting, and W.L. Bancroft was appointed secretary. It was decided that the governor appoint a central committee which would receive and distribute all contributions. The committee, which was to be known as the Fire Relief Commission of Michigan, was appointed the following day. Henry B. Baldwin, former governor of Michigan, and at this time president of the Second National Bank in Detroit, was named chairman of the new committee. Other members of the committee were D.C. Whitewood of the Wayne County Savings Bank of Detroit, Alexander H. Dee, president of the American National Bank, Detroit, George C. Codd, postmaster of Detroit, F.W. Swift, a member of the business firm of Swift and Dodds of Detroit, United States Senator Omar D. Conger of Port Huron, and Charles T. Gorham, a banker of Marshall. On October 11th, J.B. Hubble, agent of the newly formed Red Cross Society of Rochester, New York, was in Detroit. He wrote to Clara Barton a letter in which he stated that the Port Huron and Detroit committees do not work together. The same afternoon, the Fire Relief Commission of Michigan met in Detroit to organize. The Port Huron Relief Committee and the Fire Relief Commission of Michigan, which had its headquarters in Detroit, continued to work separately. The report the Fire Relief Commission of Michigan made to Governor David H. Jerome on February 22, 1882, made no mention whatsoever of the Port Huron Relief Committee. United States Senator Omar D. Conger was an active and influential member of the Port Huron Relief Committee. On September, Mrs. Omar D. Conger wrote Miss Clara Barton as follows. Mr. Conger has been 4 times through the burnt district to see what they most need, and every time issues a new call or appeal for help. Everything sent here is sent among them as speedily as steam and ready hands and hearts can do it, and we think the distributors are faithful men who will not neglect any. A great deal of clothing has been sent, but I think bedding and beds are needed. The weather is mild just now, but it will soon be cruelly cold, especially for those who have been accustomed to having things as comfortable as you and I have. They must be fed, too, and think of it until next harvest time. They are busy getting in wheat and grass seed. My husband says many fields are beginning to show the green of wheat, and he talks hopefully to them and tells them to work on just as fast as they can, and if possible to build, even out of the burnt timbers, log shelters before winter. They need lumber, nails, glass, everything, in fact, for living. There are not a great many in the hospital at present. We rejoice to hear that the Red Cross is like a good case of vaccination working successfully, and prayer the Divine Father that it may save many who are ready to perish. On November 23, 1881, M.H. Allard, Secretary of Port Huron Relief Committee, told a reporter of the New York Daily Tribune that 2,200 families were under the care of his committee. Allard stated that every one of them has made a sworn affidavit to the extent of the losses by the fire and its present means. Having satisfied ourselves that the applicant was worthy, a ledger account was opened with him. He was credited with the extent of his losses, and everything given to him was charged to him. Clothes at the value set upon them by the person giving them, agricultural implements, lumber, provisions at cost price. The applicant was then given enough wheat to sow all the land that he could prepare on his farm ranging from 5 to 60 acres. I never saw the wheat crop look so promising as now. Of course, plows and harrows were necessary at once. These were furnished to the farmers, but hoes, rakes, mowers, reapers, threshing machines, and lumber wagons they still need, and unless they are procured before harvest, the wheat crop, however large, will be a failure. Every family has also received from 2,500 to 3,000 feet of lumber to build a temporary house, or rather a shanty, for that is all it really is. Some people used logs to build the sides of the house, using the boards only for flooring and roofing, and so were able to make nice dwellings. Where only the boards could be used, the shanties will not be able to keep out much cold, for the lumber was green and will shrink, so that there will be wide cracks on the walls. This lumber was purchased mostly in Saginaw at wholesale prices, and yet this alone took $30,000 from our cash subscriptions. Allard informed the Tribune reporter that his committee had received all the clothing that was needed, but that there was a great need for money to give to the families to buy food for themselves until summer, and to buy hay and feed so that each family would have enough for one team and a cow. On February 10, 1882, Allard reported to Governor David H. Jerome that the Port Huron Relief Committee had received $192,831 in cash, of which $175,000 had been expended and appropriated, leaving a balance of $17,822. The committee had received and distributed goods valued at $225,960. When on February 22, 1882, the Fire Relief Commission of Michigan submitted its report to Governor Jerome, it was signed by all members of the commission appointed to it by the governor on October 6, 1881, with the exception of the United States Senator Omar D. Conger. In 1882, Governor David H. Jerome convened a special session of the state legislature, delivering a special message to this body of February 23. He presented a general account of the ravages of the fire, calling attention to the fact that the burned area was agricultural and that the people had to be sustained until the next harvest time. On March 11th, an act was approved which appropriated $250,000 to provide aid to the sufferers of the fire. The act also authorized $15,000 to be expended for the rebuilding of schoolhouses. The money was to be dispersed by the Fire Relief Commission of Michigan. It was ordered that the act take immediate effect. As the fire made 14,438 persons dependent upon public aid, the average amount appropriated per person was $17.31. The Fire Relief Commission of Michigan organized the burned area into districts, which included from 1 to 5 townships each. For sake of convenience, half of the townships could be in one district and the other half in another. A responsible and prominent person living in the district was named relief agent, who distributed supplies to those who had suffered losses as a result of the fire. Relief agents were assisted by township supervisors. The district agents appointed by the Fire Relief Commission were Charles E. Thompson, Bad Axe, and so on, a rather long list. The applicant for relief was required to make a statement which consisted of the following 3 principal parts. 1. Inventory losses. 2. Inventory of articles saved. And 3. Articles required. The number of members in the family was also recorded. An example of the statement made by a farmer in Lincoln Township in Huron County is the following. Buildings and houses, stable and hog pen value $100. Fences 160 rods, rail fence value $80. Crops, clothing, household furniture, stock, farming implements, fruit trees, and etc. And finally, remarks. During the period this farmer was dependent upon fire relief, he received a total of 8 barrels and 258.5 pounds of flour, 277.5 pounds of pork, 45 pounds of sugar, 39.5 pounds of rice, 9 pounds of tea, 15 pounds of beans, 17.5 pounds of crackers, 39.5 pounds of corn, beef, and 3 1/2 pounds of coffee. He also obtained various articles of clothing, furniture, bedding, kitchen utensils, including one spider, candles, tools, nails, soap, tobacco, and a number of other articles. The smallest items were listed, such as 1 box of matches. He obtained 3,800 feet of lumber and 3 tons of hay, From the Bay City Relief Committee, the Port Huron Relief Committee, and the State Relief Commission, he received a total of $127 in cash. $11 of this amount was for the payment of taxes. Spring seeds were the last 4 items on the list of supplies issued to this particular farmer. They were 10 bushels of oats, 10 bushels of peas, 4 bushels of wheat, and 10 bushels of potatoes. The Fire Relief Commission of Michigan received contributions from all parts of the country, and especially from the cities in the northeastern part of the United States. The City of New York gave the Detroit Relief Committee and the Fire Relief Commission more than $130,000, while Boston contributed more than $57,000 to these 2 agencies. Miss Sarah F. Smiley of Saratoga, New York, and Miss Rebecca Morris of New York visited the burned districts. After their return east, Miss Smiley raised money which was sent to an association of women in Detroit, which established and maintained a hospital at Minden for persons who were sick as a result of the fire. Groups that made cash donations to Port Huron Relief Committee included the circus personnel of P.T. Barnum's Greatest Show on Earth, a collection of $83 taken up by the inmates of the Michigan State Prison, and a cash contribution from the Salem Society of Deaf Mutes of Salem, Massachusetts. The committee also received a box of clothing from the wardrobe of Rutherford B. Hayes, President of the United States, from 1877 to 1881. L.B. Rice of Port Huron, who raised young fruit trees, went from door to door soliciting money to provide for the replanting of the fruit trees and delivered personally some 200 saplings to the burnt area. By June 12, 1882, the Port Huron Relief Committee had received $196,327 in cash, and the cash value donated goods was estimated at around $269,327. The supplies purchased by the communities came to $110,466. Of this amount, $13,825 was spent for flour, $37,000 for lumber, and $40,000 for seed, wheat, and feed cash given. The Fire Relief Commission of Michigan did not make its final report until December 7, 1882. The report was signed by H.P. Baldwin, chairman. Beginning of disaster relief of the American Red Cross. It is true that the American Red Cross played a relatively minor and indirect part in the provision of relief to the sufferers of the Michigan forest fires of 1881. On the other hand, it is of great interest and significance that this activity marked the beginning of disaster relief of this organization. This activity also helped Clara Barton in securing official recognition for the American Red Cross. The Treaty of Geneva, more widely known as the Geneva Convention, was signed by various countries on August 22, 1864. Relief societies in the various countries adhering to the Geneva Convention carried on their work under the sign of the Red Cross. When Clara Barton returned to the United States in 1873, she began her long task of promoting American participation in the work of the Geneva Convention. Finally, on May 21, 1881, the American Association of the Red Cross, was, as it was then known, was organized in her rooms at 1326 I Street, Northwest, Washington, D.C. The new organization received little publicity, and Clara Barton still encountered apathy and indifference. Some feared entangling alliances. On August 22, 1881, the first local chapter was formed at Dansville, New York, where Miss Barton lived. Clara Barton believed the Red Cross should not only work for the relief of suffering in war, but should also help in such calamities as the devastating fires and floods. The news of the Michigan forest fire aroused her to action. The Dansville chapter issued the first Red Cross appeal for help, which was printed by the Dansville Advertiser on September 13, 1881. The first reports made by the Dansville Red Cross Society to the headquarters in Washington, D.C. states that if we did not hear the crackling of the flames, our skies grew murky and dark, and our atmosphere bitter with the drifting smoke that rolled over from the blazing fields of our neighbors in Michigan, whose living thousands fled in terror, whose dying hundreds writhed in the embers, and whose dead blackened in the ashes of their hard-earned homes. Instantly, we felt the help and strength of our organization, young and untired as it was. We were grateful that in the first ordeal your sympathetic president was with us. We were deeply grateful for the prompt call to action given through her, which rallied us to our work. Our relief rooms were instantly secured, and our white banner with its bright scarlet cross, which has never been furled since that hour, was thrown to the breeze, telling to every looker-on what we were there to do, and pointing to every generous heart an outlet for its sympathy. We had mistaken the spirit of our people. Our scarce open doorway was filled with men, women, and children bringing their gifts of pity and love. Tables and shelves were piled on our working committee of ladies took every article under inspection. Their faithful hands made all garments whole and strong. And lastly, each article received the stamp of the Society of the Red Cross, and all were carefully and quickly consigned to the firm packing cases awaiting them. 8 large boxes were shipped at first. Others followed directly, and so continued until notified by the Relief Committee of Michigan that no more were needed. Following the news of the forest fires in Michigan, 2 new local chapters were organized, one at Rochester, New York, and the other at Syracuse, New York. On September 19th, the first meeting of the Red Cross Society of Rochester was held to aid the Michigan sufferers of the forest fires. Miss Barton was not present due to illness. Only 4 contributions, totaling only $217, were received. Later, considerably more money was raised. Major Mark J. Bunnell, representing the Red Cross Society of Dansville, wrote Miss Barton that he planned to start for Michigan on October 3rd. His purpose was to lift the Red Cross out of the darkness on October 13th. The Dansville Advertiser reported that Major Mark J. Bunnell returned Saturday from Michigan, where he had been in the interest of the Red Cross Society of Dansville. He found the relief business at Port Huron of huge proportions, and the work finally systemized. About 50 men are at work day and night receiving the forwarding goods. About $150,000 in cash and $270,000 in goods had been received up to that time. And that concludes Walls of Flame by Gerard Schultz. It is hard sitting here in this apartment in the west side of Saginaw, Michigan to realize that such a horrible disaster struck right here. But thank you for taking the time to listen. Hope that you enjoyed this, and it was a lesson in Michigan history for me that I had never been aware of before. So thanks for stopping by and spending part of your day with me.